how to work, right? Like, you get what you want by working, and that nothing ever comes easy. And so for me, I think it's just always been easier to be authentic, right? It's too hard to be something you're not.
Hey, Jared. Welcome to the show. We're so glad that you were able to make it. So here's kind of some of the things that I was gathering about you. So I have 4 kids. Okay. My youngest is 12. My oldest is 27. You declare at 8 years old, you want to be a football player.
Yes.
When did it actually get real? Where you're like, I'm doing this and that's it.
I never had any other goal. I had never had a plan in life. I tell kids all the time, I don't recommend it. I encourage my kids to, do whatever they want to do. But I put every single egg in that basket. I quit playing baseball. I was a really, really good baseball player. And I quit playing baseball when I was like in 7th grade. Quit running track, quit doing everything except football. And so, it was always my goal. There was no other. I was like, I heard a story about Dick Butkus. Dick Butkus supposedly when he got to Ohio State, they told him like, you have to sign up for classes. And he said, I didn't come here to go to class. I came here to play ball. So, that was my whole mindset was just ball. And it worked out. Like I said, I don't recommend it for people. My path ended up working out okay.
So Jared, one of the things that I noticed about you, and I actually spent quite a bit of time myself, just because I really like to know the personality, and I love, your daughters are beautiful. They're
thank you so much.
They're so cute. But I like to really kind of get into depth and like understand your personality. And the one thing that I really love about you, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, but one of the things I love about you is a lot of times when athletes leave, when they retire or there's an injury or it's a forced leave, they lose their identity and they really kind of spiral into a depression or into maybe just a shell and trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And the thing I love about you is, number one, you're freaking hysterical. Okay. Number one. Number two, like you just have such a great personality and you're so open and you're so honest and authentic. Has it always been like that?
Yeah. I think, if you're trying to live double lives, I mean, come on, that's gotta be taxing. So, like I said, I grew up on a horse ranch, right? I grew up, like my dad was my biggest hero. My grandfather was my biggest hero. My dad was probably second. So I always grew up, with the examples of hard work. We went through tough times just as everybody has, parents got divorced, dad worked 3 jobs, all that stuff. My mom and stepdad, they're phenomenal and their lives. So I've always had phenomenal role models on how to work, right? Like, you get what you want by working, and that nothing ever comes easy. And so for me, I think it's just always been easier to be authentic, right? It's too hard to be something you're not. And even I think everybody you go through, every kid, you try to find your path, right? I obviously, growing up on a ranch, I rebelled, right? I all of a sudden you want to be whatever the hip hop genre is. I used to have to listen to country at home and listen to all the, I had like a Too Short tape hidden in my backpack so I could put it in my Walkman when I went to school.
Did you have really awesome overalls that you didn't wear a shirt under and a bandana?
No, see, I was a farmer, right? So actually I did have overalls, but I had like the short, you remember like the short alls with one strap down?
Yeah.
It was cool. So I rocked that, but then, we went through ebbs and flows of having money to being super broke. So it was like, I remember going to school and my dad's like, hey, I can get you a pair of sweats. And I'm like, tight. So you figure out how to, Jinkos were like the hot item, right? I had to try to figure out how to get Jinkos back in the day. My dad was funny. He'd take me to the Western store, buy me, whatever, he'd fit $500 on boots, hats, that. If I would ask my dad for a pair of Jinkos, I had to manipulate my mom to get that.
Right.
My dad was like, you get that crap sag in your pants. So, but my point to that is like, everybody, you go through your identity phases, right? But you always come back to what you're raised on and what your roots are. My roots were, you take the horses and that stuff out of it. It was hard work. It was honesty. It was, kind of like, my dad and my mom both big on, kind of self-evaluate, it's like, my dad never pulled punches, and just, it was what it was. And, if you want something, go get it. That's why when I said I was 8 years old, most parents are like, okay, Johnny, go to school, do whatever. My dad dropped me off at the gate, which was about a mile from the gate to up to the house, and I'd have to run it every night. I'd come home from practice, I'd run it. It was eat, sleep, drink it until you achieve it. And so that's just how I grew up. And that was the mindset I always had. I always felt like the underdog. So again, it was like creating these personas in your mind is only going to make you, it's only going to cloud your judgment, right? It's only going to distract you. So for me, authenticity is all I ever had. So. And
I love the fact you still write, huh?
Yeah, you know what? It's been now my kids are getting to this age. I've actually, my dad's coming up this way, and I got rid of the horses. My kids want to start riding now, and so I'm in the process of there's some horse sales this week, and I got to take a peek and look at. So
yeah, now you're going to be poor. You're going to be super duper poor.
That, right? So we moved. Bounced around quite a bit, so it wasn't conducive for owning horses. Now we're a little more stable, and like I said, now the kids want to do it. That's what you learn, right? Whatever your kids are into, that's what you end up having to be into, because that's what you spend all your time doing. I just try to push them to the stuff I like to do,
right?
And that way we can all share it together.
Plus, because you're going to come back to me 300 times for all this advice. I know you will. I promise you, I'll give you my cell. When your daughters get horses, there's no boys.
Yes, that's
the best thing ever in the entire world. They will choose that horse over the boy anytime.
That's mine are 7 and 10, so I'm hoping I still got some more years with that. But
you have 10 more years at least.
Yeah, at least, right? And my plan is, they're so far the daddy's girls. That's why my wife and I always joke, like, gotta have the cool house, we gotta have all the fun stuff to do. That way everybody comes here, we can keep. And I know people say like, oh, helicopter parenting is bad. Absolutely not. I'm like.
Heck no.
I'm like Marine One, just hovering.
Exactly.
You can have some freedom, but dad's always going to know where you're at.
Hey, I'll tell you, my oldest daughter's 27. The other one's 26. I was at every prom, every single prom. We were the after party, every single one. We were the breakfast party, every single one.
Yep.
Helicopter, I don't care. That's fine. It's either that kind of therapy or another kind of therapy.
Right? Like, I think I'd rather have my kids be like, man, my parents were way too involved.
Right.
Then, you see some of these, that just aren't there. And we had friends that way growing up, right?
Right.
Parents are down in Cabo every week, and they're all losers now. So it is what
it's true.
It is what it is. I read a cool stat one time that said, just by having two parents involved in a kid's life, that kid has 70% chance has a 70% less chance of being in poverty. It didn't say even if you were a good parent. It was just like being present is like the most important thing in kids' lives. So I've always taken that hard, and that goes back to like when you see guys, that leave the sport and they have that identity crisis, right? And that's really what it is. It's unfortunate that a lot of athletes have an identity crisis, and that leads to depression, abuse, whatever the after side of that is. But again, that was how I grew up with faith was our number one thing. We were raised as strong Christian family. Not to say that, my life was always, I was always practicing. I always joke that I was on the heart rate monitor, but that's where I found my identity, right? My identity through Christ. My identity is, with my family, my kids. And I've understood since I was young that even if I played 15 years in the league, right? That's a long, long career. That's still such a short span of your life. So if this is who you are, it's a part of who I am, right? Because it was great, but they can't be all you are, and they can't be all that you're about. And, I don't know. I just always knew, like, if I were to die and that's the only thing people talked about, I probably didn't have a significant life. And so
I love that you say that, because, it's funny that you say that, Jared, because my grandmother and grandfather were married 62 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they hard life. Like maybe the last 20 years was comfortable, or about 30 years or whatever, but they had a hard life. They immigrated, no education, and they built up a ton. They were amazing, amazing people. But I remember, so my father drowned when I was 3, and it caused massive hardship. And they went through a time where my grandfather was, pretty sad and pretty depressed and, angry and everything else. But they didn't really speak for 3 years. Like really, they didn't really speak for 3 years. He was completely checked out. She was focusing on the kids, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember when my grandmother was dying, I was thinking 62 years. Good God, I've only been married 6 and I want to choke him. That's a whole other podcast.
That sounds like a couch session.
maybe you should come over, bring the horses, bring the girls. So it was actually really funny because we were talking about this and she goes, Stephynie, she goes, if you can count 10% of your marriage out, she goes, look at the other 90%, the building, the loving, the growing and everything else. And I stopped for a second and I was like, gosh, 62 years is so long. And if you think of 6 years just being really bad, whatever, maybe it's a year here, maybe it's 3 over here, maybe it's 1. The way she said it, Jared, is in such a loving, kind way to my grandfather.
Yeah.
Focus on God first, focus on the kids next. And you guys will come together and apart and together and apart. But when you look back at the marriage as a whole and 10% was bad, that's an A.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's like parenting, right? I always say it's a 90-10 rule. 90% of it's amazing. 10% you want to just strangle, everybody. There's no handbooks with it. And that's what the important thing is. And that's what, all my friends that get married and when getting married, that's why, both my wife and I, we met, totally organically. And it was what, I told myself we got married later in life. Right. And, just because I value the sanctity of marriage so much, I knew that, if you're not mentally stable to do it, don't do it. But yeah, it's definitely, and, you go through, you talk with our pastors and stuff before we got married, and that's what he said. It's like, you have to have, it's just like anything in life, right? Accountability to something other than yourself, because yourself will let yourself down 99.9%
constantly,
of the time.
consistently.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So, and that's with life, right? So, I tell people, I don't remember Bible people. My accountability happens to be to Christ. It's not that for everybody. I wish it was, but it's not. But I just encourage people in general to have an identity outside of whatever it is you do,
Right.
because that fades, right? And to have personal accountability to somebody, again, like you said, if it's to your wife and she lets you down, now you spiral. Or if it's to your husband and they let you down, now you spiral. Even your kids, right? I encourage my kids, like, God should be first. Because, if mom and dad ever fail you, that can derail your life.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's
true.
perspective. And you obviously get that with age, and you get that with, having good people around you. And it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that, society, especially when you look at social media now, right? It's this narcissistic me. And that leads over to, and unfortunately, athletes, I'll speak to athletes because that's what I know, is that's what you fall into. You fall into that societal, that they build you up, and you're up here, and when they don't need you anymore, it's a long
You're
fall.
done.
And I think I just understood that. I think, I was able to learn from my ebbs and flows in life, and, if you're not growing, you're falling. That's what I tell my kids too. It's like, failure is only failure if you don't learn from it. So
I'd be careful because she has a mean right hook. So I'd be really careful.
Yes,
She's got a mean right hook.
My little one, I was messing with my little one the other day, and they're in karate, which is awesome. And I was messing with her, telling her karate didn't work, and she placed a front kick in the wrong spot for a dude, and it worked.
Love it. And for her to see her dad go down gave her a ton of confidence. She's like, I got this.
Oh, they beat up on me all the time. I'm telling you, I'm big, but I tell them, like, I got a bad back. Dad's soft these days.
Right. You're like, I'm a mess. Take it easy. Take it easy.
Physically, I'm a mess.
So tell me about the most pivotal decision thing that happened to you, whatever it is. It could be a decision. It could be a choice. It could be anything before the NFL. What was the biggest thing?
Yeah. Man, before the NFL. My goodness. That's a tough one. Because before the NFL, my only goal was to get to the NFL.
You're like, that was it, Steph. That was the choice.
No, I said, my parents were divorced. Ebbs and flows in life. I was a punk kid, always get in trouble. But I've always, by the grace of God, had love in my family, right? Like my dad, my mom, my stepdad, always been there for me. And I've always had the right people around me, coaches and everybody to pull me through when I've guessed. So I guess the best decision that I made, I didn't even really make it, was having quality people around me. And so that's led to the success, and even in older in life. And I think that's so huge, is to have people around you that will tell you the truth. And that's, again, I think, not having yes people and not having, My dad was not afraid to tune me up and then, give me a hug right afterwards and tell me he loved me. So, I think it's accountability factor and having good people around you.
So I think for our listeners, I mean, one of the things, I don't know if you've listened to the podcast before, but this is the biggest thing that I say over and over again. So these athletes, they have tons of yes people around when they finally make it. And they really make it, or they're reasonably successful. They have cousins and aunts and uncles and all kinds of people, great friends to do all of their things for them. And people just tell them yes over and over and over again. And it's about accountability, and it's about structure, and it's about the people that don't care about what you have, but they really want you to succeed. And so oftentimes, Jared, I say no. So people get blown away because I'll have an athlete come to me or an agent come to me, and I'll sit down and I'll meet with them and I'll be like, and I'm very gracious all the time, because just knowing another human who's going through crisis or trauma or whatever it is, I'm very empathetic, but I'll say no. And I say no 80% of the time. And you see this giant dude just stand up and he goes, wait, what? Wait, well, I'm sorry, what? And I'm like, yeah, no. You need therapy before me, or you need coaching before me, or you need something before me, because I'm not super easy and nice. And I'm not going to just tell you, we're going to have a measurement of success. And you should see, they're like, they don't know how to react. They're looking at their agent or their wife and they're like, what's going on? What is this? That's
the thing. Since they were little, they've never been told that, right?
That's right.
You get passed through. And to be honest, like I said, I've had to have the rug pulled out for me a couple of times in my life as well. That's because you get on this path of, I don't want to call it borderline recklessness, right? It's usually, I would say majority of people, it's not malicious.
Right.
It's just
for
ignorant.
Sure.
It's ignorance. It's having dumb fun. It's this I just call it a meat stick way of thinking, right? You're focused on whatever it is, the goal that you're trying to get to, and you don't really notice all the other stuff because you don't have people, you've never had to be accountable outside of what you have to do as your profession.
No,
and
you're
it's great
completely
because
right.
those people can help you focus solely on your possession or your profession, but it doesn't help you in life, because that's not the real world, right? So I'm one of those guys, like once I read something, see something, hear something, I can't forget it. And, when I was getting married, our pastor, we were doing our premarital counseling. He said the two biggest decisions anybody will ever make in their life, right? It's one, decide whether or not to follow Christ, and B, who you marry. Because you're either going to marry somebody that's going to help you grow, right? That's going to lift you up, or what I call a boat anchor. And there's no in between, right? You're either helping each other up or you're holding each other down. And he said those are the two decisions that matter most in life. And even if you take the religious aspect out of it and just look at even the marriage aspect out of it, it's who you surround yourself with, right? And that's, I think, as I can look back at my life and, I laugh, me and my best friend in the world, we laugh. We're like, well, we probably shouldn't have known each other when we were younger. That was a bad decision.
You're all, that was the bad decision, Steph.
That was a bad decision right there. Hanging out with the friends I hung out with. And I'm still friends with them today. That's probably the worst decision. It's about having authentic people around you, right? And I think it's hard. That is an extremely hard lesson to learn unless you have people in influential roles in your life that are willing to tell you no, that are willing to, bust your chops if you need it and pull you back down. And lucky for me, I've always had that in my life.
So I want to ask you a question. And I did no research on this because I wanted it to be super authentic. So you can reach their phone and pop me, or you can be like, So did you have 2 or 3 DUIs? And that happened when you were playing?
In 5 months apart. Yep. And so that was a rough patch, right? Where you have to deal with it. And so for me, again, having the right people in my life, I went and said, you know what, this is a bad pattern, right? Did I think I had an issue? No. Was I young and dumb and with, too much money in my pocket, acting reckless? 100%. But I said to myself, this isn't a path you need to be on, right? And so I was like, screw it, I'm going to go to these outpatient classes. I'm going to figure out what life looks like for me, right? And so, I went in and talked with the Chiefs and we had great dialogue. And that's the thing, I had Don Patterson when I got into the Chiefs was phenomenal, right? So many guys, coming in, getting in trouble in college and stuff. And so the problem is I had issues in college, right? Where we'd gotten, we drink it, whether possessions or parties at the house, assault, everything was revolved around like, here's like Friday Night Lights, right? play hard, work hard. And that was just kind of what we did. We didn't know we were hurting anybody or breaking the law until it happened.
And that's kind of the crap thing for our kids, because even though you had a major consequence and it was terrible and it was in the limelight and you're such a great guy, Jared, imagine what they're going to have to go through. Like, imagine like that one little tiny thing, they're done. It's just,
it's terrible. And that's the thing. It's like, so again, you know, at times you don't have the right people around you, right? At times you don't have, you know, certain things, it checks and balances, and that's what life's really about. And so, but luckily I had resources, and I got to a point where I was like, this is going down a path that is super bad. So let's use these resources and see where you're at in life. Right. And so that's what I did. And I again, being authentic and being just, you know, real. I mean, I had to face the music, and I went and did it, and I had tough conversations with people. I mean, my best friend died from drinking and driving, growing up when I was in high school. And that was the worst phone call I ever had to make to his parents, right? Knowing that I had to come across the ticker that I got arrested. It was the worst phone call I ever had to make. And I took the lashings I had to take, right? And it was what it was. I had to talk to my grandfather, who was my hero. He basically told me, quit effing up. He didn't bring, you know, our last name through all these wars for me to screw it up. So it was one of those, like, take a long, hard look in the mirror and do some growing up, realize, listen, you can't be young and dumb forever. And, you know, and I learned some valuable life skills. I learned some valuable, self-reflection skills, right? And I was able to put all these things into a toolbox to help me in life. And I honestly believe it made me a better, you know, husband, better father, better, you know, Christian, just a better human being. And so again, in the moment you want to run from those mistakes, right? In the moment they're really embarrassing. And even still now, you have people like, oh, white people bring stuff up 15, 20 years ago. And it's like, it is what it is. It is what it is for me, because I've already dealt with it. You know, heck, they're all expunged. It is so, but it's one of those things that, you know, unless that rug gets pulled out, sometimes your checks and balances are off. So yeah, that's probably the most pivotal point in my life. Because that was at those crossroads of, okay, let's find out if you have an issue, right? Address that. B, okay, so it's not an issue, then you're just dumb and you're an idiot and you need to grow up and you have a responsibility. Whether I wanted, I think for me, I didn't really want to be a role model. I had no desire to be a role model to other people, just because I didn't grow up with like athletes as role models.
But that right there separates you. That right there is a separating factor, because that's why our kids, and obviously no disrespect to you whatsoever, okay? But like, that's why our kids are so crazy about athletes, because of that, instead of having it at home or having it with God, like you said.
100%. And that, but I also realized, like, whether I want to or not, I'm in that position.
Yes.
Right. And there's little kids having my jersey and, you know, other stuff like that. And what kind of human being are you? Right. And that's what it came down to. And my best friend's dad, he was our pastor growing up. And again, here's another thing. Like I said, you forget. I called him, you know, when this happened, and we talked. He said, Jared, here's the deal. I know you. He said, what are you? If you claim to be a Christian, if you claim to be this, then stand on the fundamentals of who you are. If you're an asshole, be an asshole. That's fine. But he said, let me tell you something. The world has enough assholes. We need more moral heroes. And so when your pastor's cussing at you,
you know that it's time to get straight, Jared. You're like, no more playing around.
So that's why I tell people, and that's why, you know, I don't have a problem bringing it up. I've always been honest with people, and I said, you know, I was a maturity issue, but I'm a lucky one, right? Because there are a lot of guys with substance abuse issues. There's a lot of guys that don't handle that, right? I was fortunate enough to realize that mine was a maturity issue, and that I had to basically, you know, realize that it just can't be this meat stick, you know, way of living and playing ball, where you actually have a social responsibility, you know, to yourself, to your community, to your team, because like you said, like it or not, you're in an influential role. And so that was it, man. So that's kind of, again, I had the right people around me to say, hey, it's time to check yourself and figure out who you want to be as a man. And that's where I went. And I tell you what, I look back at the challenges in my life through all that. I mean, I was a knucklehead growing up. I'm saying I grew up. It took me until I was 26 to actually grow up. And even then, I probably had some back.
Your wife's in the back going,
moments.
"Wait, Jared, it's actually 36."
she was like at 29. You were still a pain in the ass.
That's really awesome. So one of the things that I wanted to clarify with you, and I wanted to kind of see how you felt on it before we move on to Wounded Warriors, is that a lot of times when people come on, we have a podcast that's Spin It, which is obstacles and opportunities. We started doing Spin It on sports because of exactly what you just said. There are those jerks that are just like, hey, this is what it is. And then there's those people like you that have real life lessons to share. So when I bring up the obstacle to the athlete, it's to inspire and impact and show growth that people can actually really do it. And you hold these people on this massive, huge pedestal, but they've gone through things and look at who they are now.
100%. I think that's the problem, right? And it's obviously, and I used to laugh in the locker room because, you'd get media training and it'd tell you one thing. And I kind of always buck that because so many people sounded so scripted and authentic. And then what happens is you don't have that relationship with media, right? So if you do mess up, you get pounded, right? To where at least I was always cool with people. I answered the questions. It is, like I said, you take it for what it is, you learn from it, then you can give your message out. But that's life. And I think that's the biggest thing people need to learn, like athletes, celebrities, whatever, musicians, like we're all human. At the end of the day, when we die, none of this comes, God's not going to be like, well, I was a bigger fan of Denzel, so he's in. Like it doesn't work that way. So I think with, for me, to realize that I'm in this position, you need to accept it, own it, and live up to it. It really is that thing that, yeah, I am human. And we are a society of second chances if you grow from it, right? We're a society of third chances if you show improvement. And I think that's what life is about. I think life is about constantly improving. Regrets are, it is what it is. My agent always said, we have eyes in the front of our head, not the back, so we look forward, not in the past. You learn from those mistakes. You gotta
Incredible. And the other thing is too, is, like I tell my little one who's 12, who's a huge, huge, huge athlete. He plays everything and he plays it well. I'm sorry. I'm like, what does sorry mean to you? Because I'm sorry is a change of behavior. If you do it twice, it's a pattern.
Exactly. And that's what we try to say as well. It's actions, right? It's that whole thing, speak so loud I can't hear what you're saying. That's right.
I'm going to cut that segment and put it in his room and keep playing. Alexa, play Jared. Yeah. Alexa, play Jared.
And I got that from a coach. That was a D-line coach that used to tell us that, right? It had nothing to do with it. It was just more talk about, don't tell me what you want to do.
Right.
Show me. So there's so many lessons you can take. And I think that's what separates people is the ability to apply those lessons outside of the realm of football, right? Outside of the realm of the athlete. And on all the athletes I know that are doing just fine with retirement and all that stuff, they're just genuinely good people, right? They're genuinely happy. They don't have the drama. They don't have, they've figured out that balance in life. And you see it a lot in the military too, right? I mean, guys come back and they're completely whacked. And the ones that make it, who have done some crazy things, they understand how to compartmentalize. Not that compartmentalization is always the best tool, but they understand how to compartmentalize their life and how to deal with, okay, if this was war, I have to deal with this, right? But when I come home, this is a whole separate part of my family. Like, this was traumatic and this is crazy. And I'll never even express to think I know what those guys go through. But my buddies that have been through it and that have come back and have gone on to live successful lives, they have a mental fortitude that is rare. And again, that's not everybody. And I think the biggest thing is for me as well is don't be afraid to seek help, right? Like people that, and I'm not talking just from therapy, but ask questions. Like, I think so many people get afraid to ask questions because they don't want to, everybody wants to think they know it all. And that was one thing my dad always instilled in us, he was never afraid to cry, never afraid to do it. So it wasn't that like, hey, grow tough, man, don't cry, don't afraid for feelings. He would always tell us, hey, you want to come talk to me man to man, we can hash it out and we'll leave the father son stuff, alone and we can just, get after it. And so it was always encouraged, right? It was always encouraged, get it off your chest. Let's deal with the issue now and not let it compound. And I think unfortunately, so many people in our line of work, they let things compound until it becomes a demon that they can't get rid of. So, it's unfortunate, and hopefully enough guys will figure it out.
So one of the things, as we were talking about before the show, so I have 3 lines of business. So first is business consulting, and we do that globally. Second is high performance impact coaching. So not like the lay on my couch and let me tell you how great you are, but the actual one we actually have a measurement of success when we get to those points, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then crisis. And one of the things that, and by the way, crisis, not crisis communication. So not like getting you out to media and then spinning Jared's story, but making sure that we have the resources here in discernment so Jared's family doesn't have to go through it. It's a private matter. You still have all the consequences. You still have all of the stuff, but you don't have a camera and you and your wife and your baby's, face constantly.
Well, yeah, it's self-accountability, right? Exactly. And some of you want to spin it to where, when the media stops talking about it, it goes away. That's not
at all, for certain. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is when my athletes, when they get done with the NFL, NHL, NBA, whatever it is, they actually have another life. And so what is that life? And I get so frustrated because guys who are not you, who don't have this amazing, amazing resources around them, parents and friends and family that really want you, your family, your wife and your children to do well, they get taken advantage of. So because they have a pocketbook and they want to start a business, it's like, Jared, go start a business, or Jared, go start a foundation. How did you choose Wounded Warriors? Tell me about that.
So for me, I started doing work in Kansas City with juvenile diabetes, JDRF, right? And great people there. And one of the ladies that got me involved in that, Yvonne Miller, she's on our board at our foundation. And I gotta be honest, she encouraged me to start a fund, right? The foundation side was start a fund. So I went to Iraq, I went to Iraq and Kuwait back in 2009 on a USO tour. And just like I said, my grandfather's and my whole family's in the military. And so when I came back, I knew I wanted to do something to give back, right? And I had a buddy in the Army, who told me about the gap in adaptive housing, a few years before that. And I just, wasn't at a spot in my mind to want to go down that road. But when I came back, I just knew I wanted to do something. So we picked up that torch. We learned about the gap in adaptive housing, and understood that, unfortunately, when our men and women come home wounded, not just mentally, physically, that they don't have the resources that they need to live the life that they need. We've had recipients that have been placed in upstairs, that are doubly amputees above the knee, wheelchair bound, placed in upstairs apartments with no elevators. So, they're literally they're either on their prosthetics going upstairs. There's people that have to live in the basement of their fellow families' homes. And then you're taking these alpha males and females and you're taking away their independence and their freedom. So we started plugging away, and we obviously had our ebbs and flows in that, just learning that process. And now we've been doing this for over 10 years, and I think we just gave away our 26th home right before Christmas. We got 7 more we're building. So we have a great organization, great group of people, and I keep it really small and tight. Our partners, if you're not in it for the right reason, I have no business. I don't care how much money you have, and if it's not for the right reasons, we don't chase it. So that's how I got started with that. And it's just been our passion. It's just been what we do. And it showed me more. I didn't even realize the impact we would have on some of these people's lives, watching them get married, have kids after this, and really creating a home, for themselves and their families, and to see the joy brought back to their life. And, we had one recipient tell me his dad would say every time he was having a bad day, he would drive him over to the house. And I didn't really fully understand at the time. He was just like, this is his independence. And that's what, when I first started, I didn't realize that's what we were giving back. And, so it's been phenomenal, and it's just, it's kind of seamless now. But I tell you what, every time we give a house away, it brings you right back to the first one. And it really makes you, appreciate how easy we have life. Honestly, it's crazy what's going on in the world right now. And you think about, how easy we have life to be able to get up, have our cup of coffee, gripe, complain about anything we want to do. And I think that's why I always had perspective from my grandfather. I always knew the men and women of the military were allowed me to play a sport for a living. So I never really took myself that serious. And I realized, I play a game for a living. This is, with all of our problems, it is still the greatest country in the world because we have the freedom generally to do whatever we want to do. if you will work hard enough, you can achieve the most success in the world that you want. So that's kind of what I do. And it just happened to be a natural fit with athletes and, military and the mutual respect we have for each other and then being outdoors, with hunting and fishing and shooting and all that stuff. I don't really fish as much as I'm more hunting and fishing. That's a whole other story. I'm a terrible fisherman. I know how to fish. I just
like fish or like fly fish? Like which one?
Fly fish. It doesn't
Anything
matter.
with a hook.
I will fish all day, all night. I can fish. I have the worst luck fishing. I don't catch anything. It's literally an ongoing joke from childhood that we could be at the trout farm and everybody would catch fish.
Oh my
me.
God, that's
We would use the same
hysterical.
bait. One of my first dates I went on with my wife, we were fishing and she outfished me. She's never fished before. And we're out fly fishing and she caught way more fish than me.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's like me and fishing. It's just I've been with guides on chartered boats and they're like, we've never not catch fish. And we don't catch
So
fish.
I bet your friends never invite you anymore because you're like the worst, like banana on the boat.
Oh, yeah. It's like, get this guy off the boat. Get this guy off the boat. Although we crushed it this year in Tahoe. We crushed it on the lake.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, it's fishing with me. I just think the hunting where I got a little more expertise.
So there you go. We just got back from Montana. We were there for 2 weeks and the wildlife, and we didn't get a lot of time to spend outside because it was 26 below. Other than that, it was phenomenal.
Montana's one of my favorite places on earth. If it wasn't for those winters, that's where we'd be living. We tried to stick it out in Minnesota at one point, and I tell you what, at minus anything,
No, same.
I'm good. I'm good. I don't need it. I don't want it. But Montana, other than that, is one of my favorite places.
That's
on earth.
awesome. So Jared, when you started, I mean, obviously you're an athlete. You're so smart. You're so well grounded. You have this amazing family around you. Did the NFL teach you anything about starting this venture, Wounded Warriors? Did it teach you any business aspects of anything?
No. So they trust me. There's plenty of resources out there for that, right? Like you can go to catalog school, you can do all these little internships. I never did. They don't really have a foundation one. I've pushed for that. They might now, but when I was there, they didn't have anything about nonprofits. I've asked the PA when I was playing and stuff. I said, yeah, you guys should do a class. Everybody starts a nonprofit. You guys want everybody to be involved in a charity. Maybe you should teach people how to run a nonprofit and a charity. It's a lot harder than you think, right? To be an actual 501c3 and
it's no joke.
That's a whole nother bag of tricks to go down. So that is something that I wish they would give more tutelage on. But for me, as far as business wise, I think I just, I own businesses and we have it, but I've always, like I said, I'm smart enough to know I'm not smart enough, if that makes sense. And so I've always left on the idea guy, and then I just find the people that will implement that idea. And I'm also one of those guys that I'm never going to go, if it doesn't work, I'm going to cut my loss early.
I love it.
Just
I love it.
Get out and let's not let this thing compound. So that, and again, I've just been lucky to meet a lot of really good people. I think that's one thing people in the NFL don't do. The biggest resource you have is networking while you are in the NFL. People think it is cool that you are in the NFL, whether you're a practice squad guy or you're Peyton Manning, you have opportunities. So when I was younger, I used to, go to all the events that we had to go to with sponsors and stuff, get business cards, send an email, stay in contact with people here and there. And lucky for me, my career grew and so financially I was able to, sustain for myself. But I now know enough people. I laugh and joke. If I ever had to go back to work, it's easy to go get a 6-figure job because you know the right people.
So wait, you're looking for a job so I could hire you?
No.
Send me your resume. Send me your resume, Jared. Not fishing.
That's actually a funny thing. That's actually a funny thing is I was just on a committee to help find a head football coach for our school. And my wife was giving me a hard time and laughing about it because everyone was like, why aren't you coach? And I was like, I'm not ready to give up Tahoe in the summers. I'm not ready to put that much time and effort in away from the family. And I was looking at the requirements, and I'm like, I don't even meet the requirements. I don't have a college degree. I have a criminal record.
I'm gonna guess they may let that slide. I'm just gonna let it guess. I'm just gonna see.
I don't meet the criteria. I should say I had a criminal record.
That's hysterical.
And so it's one of it was a funny joke, but but I was thinking that I was reading all these resumes. I was like, man, I don't even know that I could type up a resume right now. I mean, obviously I could Google it, YouTube and work my way through it. But I'm like, Never had to. Hopefully I don't have to. So,
I think you'll be okay. I'm guessing you'll be fine.
That was part of the reason. Yeah, but that was part of the reason why when I left football, I turned down a lot of broadcasting gigs right when I left and stuff like that. I just didn't want to jump back into that identity, right? I wanted to, my family had moved around the country, especially in our last couple of years. And, we've been back and forth. So it was like, to get home and have one spot, focus on the kids, focus on it just being home and not being, an athlete was super nice. And then now we're in this, now our routine is so much like if I were to ever go back to work, it was
right. She may not think that. She's coming on my podcast next week and be like, can you put him back to work? I don't want him home anymore. Please, I'll do anything.
Please. Oh, I dabbling enough. I got enough goofy crap going on that I stay busy between curling, just we're building a house. Like it's just, there's always something, the foundation. I always laugh when I tell people I don't do anything. And my wife's like,
yeah, so exactly. They're like,
For someone that doesn't do anything, you do a lot.
Tell me what advice you have, like real advice, Jared, for somebody who wants to go out and be an entrepreneur. Like what is the biggest thing that you can tell them?
Jump. I mean, do your research, right? Like do your research, know what you're getting into. But then you have to jump, right? And you got to be willing to do the work. And then it's exactly what it is. If you're going to do it yourself, unless you were just the investor, I mean, that's a whole other, right? That's a whole different side of things. But if you're going to be a true entrepreneur, you got to jump and you got to go do it. You got to put the time and effort in because no one's going to look out for it like you are. And then understand the business. I think too many guys want to get into something that they don't understand. And then it fails, right? Because they don't understand it. Someone's taking advantage of them or they don't have the knowledge for it. And then again, if you're not going to be the guy every single day, you better have a great guy who is the guy every single day. So that would be my biggest thing, but it's fear. I think too many people get this idea and this concept. They want to do it, right? They want to do it. They have it all mapped out. They want to do it, but they're afraid to jump. And if you're afraid of failure, you'll never succeed. And that's the truth.
I think that's what we're going to name this episode. If you're afraid of failure, you'll never succeed by Jared Allen. So
little wisdom, little nuggets of wisdom.
Exactly. Go and drop the mic. So I was looking at your daughters online and how much time you spend with them. I was watching Story Time. They are absolutely incredibly beautiful. Thanks to your wife.
Oh, 100%. I pray every single day they don't look like me. I'm just like, thank God my wife has strong genes. She has the strongest genes.
That's amazing. What's the biggest lesson those two have taught you about you?
It's constant humility. I think that's my constant lesson in life. I'm always getting dealt, right? It's actually, I've had this conversation all the time with friends get married. Like when I met my wife, right, there was a certain level of humility to realize, okay, I can't be selfish about me. Someone else depends on me, right? And vice versa for her too. So it's like now there's two people that have to coexist and rely on each other. But when I had my kids, I mean, they looked at me. I mean, they relied on me to survive. And that to me was just humbling. I think in that moment, and if for people that aren't religious, maybe they experience this differently. But for me, I understood God's unwavering love for me at that moment because I met my first daughter and there was just something about him, like, I don't even know this person and I would die for this human being. And I've nothing in my life, obviously my love with my wife, our relationship grew and built and that is stronger than anything I've been saying for her. But to meet somebody in a minute and understand that there's nothing you wouldn't do for that person, it's saying and that it was just humbling because now I'm like, oh crap, this person relies on me for food, water. I mean, and then, as growing up, then now there's guidance. Now there's like, crap, I got to be a role model because eventually they're going to want to, hopefully marry somebody a little cooler than their dad, but
no, they're going to marry dad. And that's pretty darn cool.
And so I think that's the lesson to learn. And my wife told me before we even just talked about kids, she said, I'm destined to have girls. And I was like, I'm destined to have boys. You know what they say? Tell God your plans and hear him laugh. Man, payback is hilarious.
I love that. That's
It's
phenomenal.
fun. But I also took this mindset too. I remember we, my wife gives me a hard time. We found out our second one was a girl. I thought for sure it was a boy. And we found the second girl. I was just kind of like, oh, it's like deflated for a minute. But I also told myself, I'm not going to raise them any different. You know, I'm going to teach them toughness. I'm going to teach them compassion. I mean, if they want to hunt, they want to play sports. Like, I'm never going to tell them they can't do something or even treat them different. And I'm probably overly hard on it. Like, why are you crying? You know, it's a long way from the heart. But I think but for me, they also teach me sensitivity, right? They teach you about, you know, understanding emotion. My wife tells me all the time, she's like, tone. Yeah. Like, tone. I'm like, but I'm not even yelling.
My husband just runs around the house and says, I talk loud. I was like, oh my God, stop saying that. You have daughters. Like, knock it off. I do the same.
So yeah, it's a constant humbling, way, but it's great because it makes you have to self-reflect on how you interact, right? It's like, you can't just take all the tough things you learned from your childhood and implement over here. You have to be fluid. So, again, I would say humility.
Awesome. So one of my team members brought in that you're a Hall of Fame finalist again this year.
Yes, I was. We'll see what happens the following year. I didn't make it. That was deflating. Last year, the first year, we didn't have really real expectations. This year, I'll be honest, I kind of had some expectations just because, you know, they're like, oh, statistically, if you're a first ballot finalist, then you don't make it, you're usually in. So I'm like, it's gotta be in, right? I don't even pay attention to it because I'm like, it's this most weird thing where you're being judged on things you've already done. And then people ask you like, whoa, what do you think about getting an Hall of Fame? I'm like, there's nothing I can do.
You're like, it's a name. It's time.
I'm like, but it makes you feel like the kid that didn't get picked for basketball. I'm like, they celebrate you in one breath. It's like, yeah, Hall of Fame finalist. And it's like, you're not good enough. And you're like, oh.
Jared, what's it going to mean to you when you get in?
It'll be cool. It'll be, again, I try to keep things in perspective, right? It'll be a moment that I celebrate. It'll be one of the crowning jewels of my career. Like, you know, it'll be one of the, you know, high points of my life in that moment. But at the end of the day, a gold, again, I try to constantly, and I know it sounds cliche, but it's really not. I try to keep things in perspective of a gold jacket. At the end of the day, doesn't change my life one bit. You know, people ask me, well, how did it feel when I didn't get in? I said, well, my wife still loves me. My kids still love me. The dog still craps in the yard. Chores still got to be done. Light bill still has to get paid. With or without a gold jacket, you know what? Life goes on. But with that said, it'll be a moment I treasure forever if it happens. And it'll be a crown jewel of an accomplishment. So, but again, I try to keep it in perspective. But like I said, this year I didn't even know I was a finalist till I think Coach Ramil told me I was a finalist. He texted me like, "Hey, I think, you know, there's a chance we go to the Hall of Fame together." And then so then my hopes kind of got up, and then I was like deflated for like a couple of days. I was kind of bummed, and then I actually felt bad about being bummed. I was like, why am I even letting this bother me? But you know, back to life as normal.
How do you want your legacy to be remembered? All of you, not NFL. All.
I would honestly hope when I'm in the ground that that football is probably the fifth or sixth thing mentioned. Honestly, I think, you know, I would hope people say I was obviously, you know, great husband, great father, that I tried to be a man of my word, live by what I talk about with faith, and be compassionate and generous. That's hopefully how I'm viewed. Not everybody's going to view me that way, and I understand that too. Listen, when you have an opinion, it doesn't always
align
for everybody.
Doesn't always align.
It doesn't always align with everybody, but it aligns with what I want. So no, I think that's what. And as I get older, I think I try to look through things from a compassionate lens and understand that I'm fortunate, and that my fortunes aren't everybody's fortunes, and that if I can do something to help others, I try to teach that my kids is you know, to try to put others first. And that's a constant battle, obviously. But yeah, I would hope that's what it is. I hope it would be, you know, people would think about, you know, my faith, my family, and how I was in that, in generosity to people that I love, and that again, I hope football was to be mentioned like, oh, he happened to be a really good football player. I hope that's kind of how the conversation goes.
The whole show has a premise of obstacles into opportunities. What's the biggest obstacle that you've overcome and been able to turn it into an opportunity?
Oh, I mean, I think hands down, you talk about is when I got, 2 DUIs in 5 months, right? And, it had, like I said, we had got in trouble with stuff involving alcohol and stuff like that in college. But they didn't really become obstacles because they were all kind of just like,
it's college.
You face it, it's college, you're having fun. But I think the reality of in that moment of honestly having to look myself in the mirror and say, okay, is this who you are? If it is, that's a problem, and that needs to be fixed. If it's not who you are, figure out who you are and start being that person, right? Because if you say this and you do this, you're just an idiot. And I think hypocrisy and complacency is two of the worst things in the world. I think mediocrity is the death of everything. And so that's probably it. And so going through that journey, I didn't see it until I looked back through it. I mean, it sucked, right? It sucked. You're getting beat up in the media. You're getting scolded by people you love. You're doing a lot of self-reflection. You're kind of like, okay. And then I got a year and a half through it. And then I had to go back to court, right? Then I had to face the consequences. And then you have to relive it. You're like, hold up, I'm doing all this great stuff. I'm already through this, right? And then I was in the middle of a contract dispute with the Chiefs. And that was getting thrown in my face. And it was a tough couple of years, getting through everything. But I made a decision like, hey, I'm going to take it on the chin. I put myself in this position. I'm going to learn from it. And to be honest, when I look back through it, and then again, I mean, I don't equate that, it worked out because I ended up getting, the contract I got with Minnesota. But when I look back at my life at that couple of years, right? And being in the program, you can't, I couldn't drink for 2 years. I couldn't do anything. And so many guys try to play the system, right? So many guys try to play it and they get, and I was just like, okay, if these are my consequences, these are the rules, I screwed up, I'm going to live by them. And I did, I did everything the NFL asked me to do, hands down, and went through all the counseling, everything. But what I learned through that, when I look back, was like, man, if I would have gotten that contract when I was this immature punk in my life, again, money only makes you what you really are. So if you're a jerk, money just makes you a bigger jerk, right? Money's never going to change you. It's just going to exacerbate what you're doing in your life. And, well, I guess it's not going to, you're not going to become a better person just because you have more money. And so,
well, it's like that song. I think it's Garth Brooks. I thank God for unanswered prayers.
Yes.
And it's just that. It's like, can you imagine what would have happened and what that may have blown up to be?
Yeah, because that spiral continues, right? And you just have more people around you. And so the ability to when I got to Minnesota, right, and to look back and see the personal growth I had as a human being, which then, I mean, football went further down the priority list, right? And I became a better football player for it, right? Understanding that I didn't have to, just because I played on the edge didn't mean I had to live on the edge, because I didn't know how to separate that as a young man. I didn't, my life had always been football. And so I didn't know how to separate that, on and off the field aspect. And so, yeah, I mean, I look at that segment of my life, and I'll never forget the date. September 26th is 2006 when I got the pop the second time. And I was like, okay, this is where we grow up. And that's what I said, again, growing
You're
up.
like, this is for reals.
Growing up is a constant maturation process. But I look back again, I would not be, I mean, I can honestly tell you, I don't think I would have had, when if my wife would have met me back then, she never would have married me for sure. So I just look at the such a growth process in my life. And then to go to Minnesota, I always laugh. I say, God always puts you where you need to be. Right. And then I went to a locker room with a bunch of great dudes. I mean, the Chiefs locker room was phenomenal at that point in my life. But then to go to the locker room with guys like Kevin Williams, married with kids, Chad, Ben Lieber, all these guys that were family men and literally, they had that balance, right? And then that was a whole other part of my life I had to figure out, like, if I'm ever going to get married, do I get married? Where am I on that? Try to live up to this contract. But I had the tools, right? The tools that I was able to get. And it wasn't until I got through it, I was able to look back and I was like, Lord, pretty tricky. I wish I could have done it a different route. but sometimes knuckleheads have to get punched in the mouth to learn something. So, but I would say, that's probably the biggest obstacle. And then, but that gave me the tools to overcome all the obstacles in my life, right? Because you're going to have ups and downs, you're going to have ebbs and flows, you're going to make mistakes, and the ability to own it, and the ability to say sorry, the ability to be genuine. I think that's all you can really, expect out of people.
Well, I think you more than mastered that. This has been so much fun, and I really, truly hope that we get to do this again, sometime next year and hear more about what's going on in your family. Where does everybody find you? Where do they follow you? Where do they find out more about the foundation? Tell me everything.
All of it. Homeschoolingwarriors.com. Like it's a long acronym. JHW or Jared Al JAH4WW. I think that's what it is. But homeschoolingwarriors.com. Let's do that one. I think Instagram is at Jared Allen 69.
We will link everything in the show notes so everybody can follow you.
Not 100% sure. I think people know that I'm very analog to being on social media. It's a constant tutelage. I'm always having to text Denise or ask my wife, hey, how do you do this again?
Right. Well, I'll send you a letter in the mail.
Yeah. Hey, snail mail still works for me. I thought email. I'm still thinking email is like the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I guess all the verified social media sites. But yeah, I'm a less is more guy on there. I know I keep getting told you should post more. You should do this. I'm like, I just don't. But that's the thing. I just genuinely. This is probably my own problem. I don't really care what other people are doing.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't think why people would care. If I had a sandwich for lunch, I'm like, I ate turkey.
Oh, Jared, don't get me started. When people were posting at Starbucks their mocha, I was like, seriously, this is what it's come to? And that's really, I don't care.
I honestly, I am so anti-social media that I actually feel like a hypocrite for being on social media, but I know, I see the good in it. I see the marketing ploys of it. I see the connections, the mass reach it has, and for the foundation and everything that's good for it. I love it. And I think it's great for that. But for what it's done to the human being, to mankind, I just shake my head. I'm like, But hey, you know what? Teach their own, and everybody will age eventually. Then no one will want to see a selfie, so it is what it is.
Exactly. Jared, thank you so much for coming on Spin It with Sports. This has been so much fun, and I can't wait to do it again soon.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.